Kelvin Ward, 50 years old, was chased down and stabbed to death in Birmingham this year. He was going to KFC to get some dinner with his son.
This is Kelvin Ward, a 50-year-old father and carpenter from Birmingham who stepped out on a Tuesday evening to grab some food with his son and never came home. 4 people came for his son with machetes and zombie knives, and when his boy managed to get away, they turned on Kelvin instead. The whole thing was caught on camera, and what those cameras recorded is one of the most painful things you are ever going to watch. Before we get into what actually went down that night, you need to understand who these people were and where all of this started, because this was not some random street fight that got out of hand. This was a revenge plan that a group of young men had been building for days before they ever laid eyes on Kelvin that evening. Kelvin Ward grew up in Birmingham as the youngest of 2 boys, raised by his mother, Christine, on her own after she separated from their father in the early 1970s. Christine was a cook who worked for the Territorial Army and raised both her sons by herself, and by her own account, Kelvin was not an easy kid growing up. She described him as a tearaway in his youth, someone who could easily have gone the wrong way. But at some point, he made a decision to change course. He learned a trade as a carpenter and laborer, built a stable life, and became the kind of man people in his area could count on. He had been with his partner Tammy McMillan for over 26 years, and together they had 3 children, their son Dylan and 2 daughters. 2 years before the murder, Kelvin had actually tried to reach out to some of the young men who would later come for his son. He offered them work, pulled from his own experience of nearly going down a bad road, and tried to show them there was a different way to live. He saw where they were heading and genuinely tried to steer them somewhere better. That is the kind of person he was, and that is what makes what they did to him so much harder to stomach. Now, Dylan, who was 19 years old at the time of the murder, had at one point been close with 3 of the 4 people who would eventually come to kill him. The friendship between Dylan and this group fell apart after they decided that Dylan had caused damage to one of their homes, specifically the home of a teenager named Aaron Coates.
The police discovered that Mr. Ward's son had been friends with the attackers, but they had fallen out, and Mr. Ward's home had been targeted in the days before the murder.
Nobody could fully prove that accusation, and the full details of how it all started never fully came out. But the group took it personally, and they decided the only response was violence. Not just a one-time confrontation, but a sustained, coordinated campaign designed to put Dylan in the ground. For 3 nights before April 18th of 2023, this group showed up at the Ward family home on Chelmsley Avenue in Castle Bromwich again and again. They set cars on fire outside and smashed the windows. They turned up carrying large zombie-type knives and bricks, using them on the property. On one of those nights, they actually fired a gun at the house. On the last day of those 3 nights, they broke in through the back door, and Dylan went upstairs with a group of his friends and waited to see who would come through. The house was so badly damaged by that point that Kelvin and Tammy had already moved the family out. Think about what it means to be a parent and watch your family get pushed out of their own home by teenagers with knives, and then understand that after all of that, the worst was still to come. The 4 people behind all of this were Tyrone Hollywood, Leighton Williams, Aaron Coates, and Rushawn Williams Reed. Hollywood was 16 years old at the time of the murder, and he was the one behind the wheel of the car that night. Williams was 28, the oldest in the group by a long way. He was not some lost kid caught up in something bigger than him. He had been in and out of trouble for years, with convictions for carrying a knife in public in 2015, heroin supply in 2016, possession of a machete in 2020, and carrying an imitation firearm in 2020. He had been released from prison on a license just 2 years before the murder and was still on that license on the night he killed Kelvin Ward. Coates was 17 and the source of the original grudge, since it was his home that the whole dispute was supposedly about. Williams Reed was also 17, and he showed up to the chase armed with his own blade. On the afternoon of April 18th, Hollywood and Coates went out and stole a Ford Kuga, then put false number plates on it so it could not be traced back to them. All four of them got into that stolen car wearing balaclavas to hide their faces, and they went looking for Dylan. That same evening, Kelvin and Dylan had stopped at the KFC on Chester Road in Castle Bromwich, which was something they sometimes did together after work or the gym. Dylan was driving a car he'd borrowed from a friend and was planning to return it after. They were just getting dinner, and that is where the stolen Kuga found them. The moment Hollywood spotted the Corsa in that KFC car park, he drove the Kuga straight at it. He rammed it repeatedly in the car park and then kept on ramming it as both cars moved out onto Chester Road, a busy public street with regular people going about their evening. The Kuga was bigger and heavier, and Hollywood had no reason to stop, so he kept hitting the Corsa again and again until the airbags inside it went off and forced both cars to a stop. Kelvin was the passenger, and Dylan was the one driving.
Drove away, but the car was repeatedly rammed until the airbags went off and it forced them to stop the vehicle. Mr. Ward's son fled from the group, and they were heard shouting, "Get him now, kill him, everyone kill him."
As soon as both cars came to a stop, Hollywood, Williams, and Williams-Reed jumped out of the Kuga and ran after Dylan on foot, with Williams and Williams-Reed both carrying long machetes and zombie knives. Doorbell cameras on houses along the road picked up audio of them shouting as they ran, and what they were saying was not ambiguous. They were calling to each other to not let Dylan get away and to keep chasing him. 3 people chasing a 19-year-old down a public street at night with blades. Dylan only survived because a stranger on the road saw what was happening and let him get on his electric bike and ride away. Back at the crash site, Kelvin had been trapped in the Corsa when the airbags went off. He got himself free, and instead of running the other way, he climbed into the abandoned stolen Kuga and drove it in the direction his son's attackers had gone. He was trying to find Dylan. He was 50 years old and unarmed, and he drove that car towards danger because his son was out there somewhere and he was not prepared to wait around and do nothing.
The help of a person on an e-bike. Mr. Ward was then seen to get inside the Kuga that they had arrived in and drive off to find his son.
Kelvin spotted Hollywood near the crash site and drove towards him, but the car struck the curb and the railings in the middle of the road and came to a stop. It missed Hollywood. Kelvin got out of the car on the road, unarmed and alone. Coates had stayed close to the vehicles this whole time and had not joined the foot chase after Dylan, and now he was standing right there. Coates took out a long machete and handed it across the railings to Hollywood. Hollywood jumped over those railings and went straight for him. Hollywood swung that blade at Kelvin multiple times, trying to land a blow, and Kelvin had nothing to defend himself with except his own body and his legs. He kept moving, going around the road and around the pedestrian crossing nearby, trying to stay out of reach. He even tried to wave down a passing car and beg the driver to let him inside, and that driver did not stop. Then Williams came back. He'd been part of the group chasing Dylan, but once Dylan escaped on the bike, he turned around and came back to where Kelvin was. Now it was 2 of them going at one unarmed man. The doorbell cameras picked up what they were shouting clearly enough to play in a courtroom. "Kill him, everyone kill him, right and again and again and again, yeah." Williams came in with his blade and delivered a single stab wound that went straight through Kelvin's work jacket and into his heart. Kelvin fell to the ground, and then Hollywood stood over him while he was dying and taunted him, still thrusting the machete towards him as his life was going out of him.
Stabbing Mr. Ward. He suffered a fatal stab wound to the heart, and Hollywood struck him again as he lay dying in the road.
All 4 of them then ran from the scene together. They had a car waiting for them at a meeting point a few streets away that they had arranged in advance, and they got in and disappeared. While Kelvin Ward lay bleeding out in the road in the middle of Castle Bromwich, these 4 people were already gone and already working on covering their tracks. Kelvin's mother, Christine, was contacted by one of her grandchildren and made her way to the scene. Police had the road cordoned off, but they let her through. She found her son lying in the road with a blanket partially covering him and a pillow under his head. She got down next to him. She held his hand and kissed his face and kept whispering in his ear, telling him to wake up, telling him to stop making a scene, because he looked so peaceful lying there that part of her brain refused to accept what was in front of her. It was the worst moment any mother could ever go through, she said later. Her brother David told the BBC that the image of their mom kneeling beside him in that road was burned into my memory and into all our memories. Kelvin had spoken to his mother on the phone just 15 minutes before the attack. He told her he was at KFC with Dylan and would come visit her that weekend. He never made it. He died from that single stab wound to the heart on the same road where he had gone to save his son.
On the road, a major investigation was launched by the police. They identified the group via DNA, CCTV, mobile phone evidence and also witness statements. The police discovered that Mr. Ward's son had been friends with the attackers, but they had fallen out and Mr. Ward's home had been targeted in the days before the murder. Detective Superintendent Sean Edwards from the Homicide Department said, "This is an absolutely horrific attack on a person that was just going about their day-to-day business."
West Midlands Police opened a major investigation that night. The four men had put real thought into hiding who they were. They wore balaclavas the whole time so their faces wouldn't show up on any cameras. After the murder, they immediately started getting rid of the evidence, throwing away their phones, their clothing, and their weapons. They thought being careful during the attack and moving fast afterward would be enough to keep them safe. It was not enough. The investigation used CCTV footage, DNA evidence, fingerprints, phone data, and witness statements to build the case against all four of them. The camera footage on its own was so thorough it was almost like the whole thing had been recorded for the police. Cameras at the KFC, on the street, and on private doorbell systems along the route had caught almost everything, from the first time the Cougar hit the Corset in the car park all the way through to Hollywood standing over Kelvin's body. The audio those doorbell cameras picked up was sharp enough to play word for word in front of a jury. But the physical evidence is what really sealed it. One of Rashawn Williams Reed's phones had been dropped at the Ward family home during one of the 3 nights of attacks before the murder, and police recovered it from the scene. A second phone belonging to him had been inside the stolen Cougar and automatically called emergency services after Kelvin crashed the car. And on that same phone, police found photos of Williams Reed posing with machetes. For someone who was going to stand in court and claim he was barely involved, that was not a great look. Williams Reed also had a brother named Cassius who was separately convicted in connection with the attacks on the Ward home before the murder, which added yet another strand connecting the family to the violence. Detective Superintendent Sean Edwards, who led the investigation for the Homicide Department, said publicly that the footage showed the ruthless determination of the attackers and described the investigation as absolutely painstaking. His team had managed to identify and place all 4 defendants at the scene, despite everything they did to disappear. The trial ran at Coventry Crown Court, and when the defendants got in that box, the stories they tried to tell fell apart quickly against the weight of the evidence. Leighton Williams, the one who actually delivered the fatal stab, sat there and told the court he was not even at the scene and had only arranged to meet Coates afterward to smoke cannabis. The judge called that false and said the evidence showed he was an enthusiastic and fully committed participant from start to finish. Coates claimed someone else had been the one to hand Hollywood the weapon and tried to distance himself from the worst of it. The judge rejected that too and said Coates carried heavy responsibility for what happened because arming Hollywood at that moment was the thing that turned a chase into a murder. Hollywood and Williams Reed did not even take the stand. Verdicts came back on the 28th of November 2023.
At Coventry Crown Court, Hollywood was convicted of murder alongside Williams from Hornway. Coates from Shard End was cleared of murder but found guilty of manslaughter. Williams Reed, 18, of Castle Vale, was cleared of murder and manslaughter. All 4 of them were convicted of conspiracy to murder Mr. Ward's son.
Coates was cleared of murder but convicted of manslaughter and conspiracy to murder because even though the jury found he did not share the full intent to kill Kelvin, he was the one who put the weapon in the hand of the person who did. Williams Reed was cleared of the murder charges but convicted of conspiracy to murder Dylan because he was there, he was armed, was part of the chase, and never walked away from any of it. Sentencing took place on the 18th of April 2024, exactly 1 year to the day after the murder. Mrs. Justice Chima Grubb addressed all four of them directly in that courtroom and laid out exactly what they had cost everyone, including themselves. Williams got a life sentence for murder with a minimum of 28 years and 5 days after time on remand was taken into account. The judge pointed out that he had been convicted of carrying knives and weapons multiple times before this. He had been in prison for it and had been out on license when he came back and did this. She made clear there was very little left to say in his defense. Hollywood received what is called detention at His Majesty's pleasure, which is the version of a life sentence handed to people who were under 18 when they committed the crime, with a minimum of 18 years and 5 days. The judge acknowledged that he had come from a troubled background, had been let down by the system in a lot of ways, and had real trauma in his past. She took all of that into account and still gave him nearly 2 decades before he could even apply for release. Coates received 21 years in total, 15 for the conspiracy and 6 extra on top for the manslaughter. Williams-Reed received 13 years and 6 months for the conspiracy. The judge told him he was a young person with genuine potential and real people in his life who believed in him, and that he threw all of that away by going along with his friends into something he should have walked away from the moment it started. The line the judge delivered that got picked up everywhere after the sentencing was this: "There are no second chances when someone is stopped to death, not for them and not for the perpetrators."
My brother's world revolved around his family. It was the alpha and omega. Everything was about the family, but we're all just hollowed out. It's really, really devastating to the point that I can't explain. There's not enough. I don't have the words. I don't have enough adjectives to actually fully describe how we feel. With my family, we have to go to a grave to visit my brother. If you make a choice to carry a knife, if you make a choice to associate with people that go around regularly with knives, you've made a choice, you've made a decision.
9 victim personal statements were read out in that courtroom from family members and a close friend who all put into words what it feels like to wake up every day knowing Kelvin is gone. Tammy, who had been with him for over 26 years and had planned a whole future with this man, said that watching the CCTV footage of his last moments was horrific, and that seeing the person she loved left to die in the road like that by people carrying machetes and wearing balaclavas broke something in her that has not healed. She said they never even got to say goodbye. Dylan, the son Kelvin died for, has been living with survivor's guilt since the night it happened. He goes to his father's grave every single day, regardless of what the weather is doing. He told his mom in the days after the murder that it should have been him out there, not his dad. The judge said directly in her sentencing remarks that Dylan will likely carry that feeling for the rest of his life, even though he did nothing wrong and bears no responsibility for the choices those 4 people made. Tammy has taken everything that happened and turned it into something. She goes into schools across the UK and talks to young people about what knife crime actually looks like up close, not what it looks like in videos or music, but what it looks like in real life when the ambulance has gone and the family is standing at a grave. She has been pushing for bleed kits to be installed in public spaces the same way defibrillators are, because she believes one could have kept Kelvin alive long enough for help to arrive. She has also been very vocal about the fact that zombie knives were being sold online with free balaclavas included in the package, which is the kind of detail that should make anyone's skin crawl. That detail alone tells you this wasn't just random violence. It was something that had been quietly normalized. Think about it. Weapons designed to intimidate, to harm, even to kill, being marketed online like everyday products, packaged, branded, and even bundled with items like balaclavas, as if the intent behind them was already understood. No questions asked. And that's where this story becomes bigger than just one night, one street, or one family. Because what happened to Kelvin Ward didn't start in that KFC parking lot. It started much earlier. It started in a culture where carrying a blade becomes a symbol of power, where fear is mistaken for respect, and where young people begin to believe that violence is not just an option, but a solution. Tammy McMillan understood that. After losing the man she had spent over 2 decades with, she didn't retreat from the world. she stepped into it. She began going into schools, standing in front of rooms full of teenagers and telling them exactly what this path leads to. What do you think about this case? Let me know in the comments section. Also, click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this. See you in the next one.